This episode is brought to you by Pixel 2 Editions, a full-service fine art printing company. More about them later. Hello and welcome to In the Art Scene podcast, a place where creatives share their stories. My name is Galina Marquez, and I have another cool story prepared for you today, so let's get to it. Welcome everybody, or welcome back to In the Art Scene podcast. I have a new guest today, and is this the first photographer we're having on the podcast? I'm not sure. I'm having a mom brain moment right now. But anyway, welcome Scott Davis, founder of Medium Photo, which is a nonprofit. Do I understand that right? And a big festival in San Diego and surrounding deserts. He is also known for a very unique photo medium, which I like. I read on your website, and I don't understand anything about that. It's platinum or a palladium printing.
Right.
So those are two big topics that I'm actually very curious to ask you about. But let me give you a chance to introduce yourself properly.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Scott Davis. I'm a photographer, and as Galina mentioned, the founder of Medium Photo, which is a nonprofit that offers educational programming for contemporary artists using photography. And our most visible facet of the nonprofit is an annual festival that we do in the spring.
All right. All righty. So since we are on that topic, I know you've been working on some updates to the festival. Well, first of all, I have never been, because I'm not a photographer. I understand very little about photography. Most of the stuff I understand is on my iPhone. as many people right now, if you have a newer iPhone, you probably can think that you're a good photographer, which is not. I understand that this is art in itself. So tell me a little bit more about this festival, how it came to be, what it is about. I know that you guys are bringing some really interesting keynote speakers, and you run some lectures and workshops. And I know that you are running a festival in Anza Borrego Desert. Is that correct?
That's one workshop that we're hosting in the desert.
All right. So yeah, let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
What's the festival about? How it came to be?
Yeah, before I started the festival, I worked in museums around the country for a little more than 15 years. And the longest position I served was as the director of exhibitions at the Museum of Photographic Arts. And, one of there were many things that brought the festival into being. And really, it was the desire to fill a void for programming and support for artists in the greater San Diego region. And when I worked at the museum, one thing that I remember vividly was we hosted a fellow from Kyiv, Ukraine, and she's actually from Odessa. But we hosted her for about 6 weeks here. And I remember we were at an opening at the museum, and she said to me, "Where are all the artists?" And it really struck me that, there needs to be a community for artists as well. And a lot of these things sort of brought about the genesis of the festival, but it was really about offering a platform for artists to gather. And as an artist myself, I had attended many photography festivals, and I knew that there were a lot of talented artists that didn't have a platform for their work. And even as a person who held a position of authority in a museum, I couldn't always, afford everybody I know an opportunity to put their work on the wall or to be part of a program. And so I realized, there are a lot of programs that would benefit artists, specifically artist talks, to get inside the head of another artist and understand why they make the work they do, to learn about the work they do, to learn about their influences. And then, of course, workshops are an extension of that. And so the festival really contains elements of both of these. And we do always have a keynote speaker, and that tends to be a very prominent individual from the national photography community. And that is a nice way to set the tone. It's probably the most heavily attended annual event that we host. But yeah, that's a quick overview.
So, when was the first festival? When did the first festival take place?
That happened in 2012. So
2012.
this
Well,
year,
it's
2022, was the 10th
10
annual.
years. So it's
Say
gonna
that
be
again.
it's 10 years. So it's gonna be
Yeah,
your
yeah. This was our
big
10th.
anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well,
Yeah,
congratulations. That's
thanks.
amazing. And so you're focusing mostly on the fine art photographers or the art community
Yeah.
in general, photographers.
Fine art photographers, but a lot of what we do overlaps with the more general fine art community, and so there's a lot of crossover by design between the two.
I see. So the next festival, when is the next festival? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so the next festival is in spring of 2023. We have a 2-day portfolio review that's taking place virtually on March 30th and 31st. And then all of the in person, publicly accessible festival events happen between April 1st and 16th.
Okay, and where is it going to be?
Um, the festival in 2023 is going to take place at a number of locations throughout the city of San Diego and the city of Tijuana.
Okay.
Um, the primary places that we are going to be programming events are the Museum of Contemporary Art in La Jolla, San Diego City College downtown, and a university in Tijuana called UABC, the Autonomous University of Baja California.
So, how come you are not having like a central location? You are so spread out with this festival.
Well, we've spread it out through time and space. And this is different than how we've done festivals in the past. In years past, the festival typically was 5 days, and it always happened at the Lafayette Hotel in North Park. And that brings benefits and liabilities. The benefits being that everything happens in one place and it's one stop shopping. Just come down, grab a drink, have a seat, and enjoy yourself. The liability is, of course, that if somebody who wants to attend is out of town, well, then they're out of luck. We do simulcast a lot of the talks that we do, so those are presented, virtually online as well. Um, in our next year in 2023, we are putting out an open call for artists to submit proposals to host festival events. And the change is really about engaging the community. It's about widening the net of what's possible rather than us curating a small selection of artist talks and workshops. We're going to really broaden that. So people such as you mentioned using an iPhone, and that might be the limit of your photography, but maybe you're curious about photography and would like to learn more. The iPhone is a vehicle that we can offer a workshop or a seminar that might relate to somebody who is just using photography at that level, but then they're curious and realize, oh, there's a lot of other programs here. There are, renowned photographers. There are people who are pursuing, unusual ideas on a range of topics. And so, in order to facilitate that, it meant to expand it, to expand the festival through time and space. And so it's a very exciting change for us, and it's important to stay in step with the world because the world continues to change a lot, and it's certainly changed a lot in the last couple of years, and part of our change is in response to that.
Well, it's definitely a very interesting format. I have never heard of a festival happening simultaneously in multiple places and spreading in time
Yeah.
like you do. So I'm very curious. to see how that's going to work out in 2023. And so we'll make sure to leave all the information in the show notes. I hope that you will share with me some links and
Yeah, of course.
to the program, to I don't know how
Hmm.
to sign up or um, how to propose, like the
Hmm.
call to artists.
Right.
So that will be something that we'll be sharing for sure. So
Absolutely.
yeah, it sounds very interesting. When I first heard about your festival, and then I checked on your website and saw your amazing desert photography, I for whatever reason I had this image in my mind that it's going to be like a Burning Man, but for photographers. you know, so but I guess that's just the images of the desert kind of
Yeah.
threw me off a little bit. I know that you have such a big love for California desert.
Hmm.
So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I am from the East Coast, and I've lived in California for more than 30 years. And when I was a kid growing up on the East Coast, um, I just dreamt a lot about the desert. It was a place I had never been. It was a place that haunted my dreams. It was a place that I was just intensely curious about. And um, so when I moved west, I began to explore the desert. And it just became a draw for me, like it is for a lot of artists and poets and painters and photographers and other people. So it's a nice escape, and it's of course a place where I make my own creative work, and so that's an important element to it as well.
That is very interesting. That you grew up dreaming of totally different places that you
Yeah.
have never been. Yeah. So, which desert is your favorite by far?
There are four deserts in North America, right? I mean, we'll just throw out some bare bones
Yeah.
information. Um, the Sonoran Desert is one of the largest in North America, and that's my favorite. It encompasses the states of Sonora, Mexico, and Arizona, and the California Desert. There's a portion of the California Desert that is part of the Sonoran Desert. There's also the Mojave Desert in which is largely in California. Um, it's not the place where I spend most of my time, though. But the Mojave Desert, of course, has the iconic Joshua trees, and really stokes the imagination of a lot of Californians. And it does me too. But I spend most of my time in Arizona and Mexico.
I see. I see. So, well, that is interesting. I don't know. I've never dreamt of desert, but I am. When I go to Arizona, I'm really enchanted. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
yeah, I can
It's an
see why.
amazing visual. Yeah, it's quite an
Yeah,
experience.
I can see how it makes your creative juices flow. So you produce most of your creative work there in the desert.
Yeah, I do.
And then you are using a very interesting medium, which is platinum printing,
Right.
which from what I can tell, unfortunately, I haven't seen your work in person, but even from what I can see on your website and your Instagram, that is something very unique.
Hmm.
And I can kind of get that luster, and the colors are kind of a very ethereal. Um,
Yeah, there's a subtle
so
warmth to the printing
yeah,
process.
yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about your process, because I know that involves some very interesting equipment, and
Right.
like I have never heard of platinum printing, and
Well,
from
you're not
reading,
alone.
yeah, I'm sure.
Um,
So maybe we will educate a couple folks here.
yeah. Well, I'll start at the foundation, which is to say that this is a black and white printmaking process, and it was invented in the 1870s. So it was invented, in the earlier years of photography, and it uses metallic platinum as the agent that forms each image. So most black and white photographs that we would have come across up until the 21st century were made using a, a process that incorporates silver, right? Metallic
Mhm.
silver. So when you see a black and white Ansel Adams photograph, you're literally looking at metallic silver in varying shades of black to gray to white. The process I use uses metallic platinum and palladium, which are extremely expensive materials. And historically, this process was used by photographers to print what they considered to be their very best work. Um, the printmaking process is very manual. There's really nothing automated about it. I have to create my own paper by hand coating these materials onto it,
Wow.
and then exposing it and processing it by hand, etc. Um, and so, photographers typically just save that for select images. And I started using this process in the mid 1990s, and I've used it exclusively ever since. I like to joke that if there's a hard way to do something, I will find it. That I tend to take the most difficult path possible to arrive at whatever the intended solution is that I'm aiming for. And so, this labor intensive printmaking process to make a photograph really appealed to me. But it also appealed to me because I had some level of control over it. These are not machine made products per se. You're not buying a box of film or something that's created from a manufacturer in a place that you don't even know where this stuff is created. You are using raw materials to create it yourself, and that really appealed to me. So I've really used the process. I guess the work that I've done that really is aligned with my creative voice is using this process in ways that it historically was never intended to be used. And, to kind of further paint a picture, one of the things about platinum printing that is very appealing to photographers is that it has this really delicate range of tones, right? So from the deepest black to the brightest white, it really has this sort of subtle symphonic look to it. And a lot of photographers like that. It's a lot of people like that. It's very pleasing to the eye. And when I really got interested in this process, an accident happened. And like any good artist, you pay attention to the mistakes. And this mistake was making a photograph in the desert at a remarkably scenic viewpoint, right? The place that lots of people go to during the day, and you gaze upon it, and it looks amazing. And I took a picture here at night, and I did so because I had an image in my mind of what I wanted to see, and what I wanted to see was the desert in these sort of haunting, dark tones at night.
Hmm.
The lesson in that, and the mistake, was that my camera was pointed at the city of Mexicali in Mexico, which is a city of 1 million people. It's about 30 miles away from where I was standing, and it's out there just glowing on the horizon. And
The
I,
light pollution.
yeah, I didn't see that. I had an image in my mind. I
Yeah.
was so fixated on what I wanted to get that I wasn't paying attention to what was actually in front of me. And when I processed that film, it was nearly a perfectly clear rectangle of film. This is an 8 by 10 inch sheet of film. And it had a black line through it. And that black line, of course, was the city, right? Which was glowing white, or what appears to be white at night. And so this image, it transformed me, and it transformed my practice because it taught me about seeing, it taught me about paying attention, and it also taught me about what our brains project, and how we bring so much of ourselves to works of art, to life, etc. And so this really put me on a path to making night photographs, and making night photographs that were printed in my darkroom as platinum palladium prints. And the quality and the texture of one of these prints, when it's seen in person, really mirrored the way that our eyes see darkness, in the sense that when you're in a very remote place or even in your closet at night and you close the door, whatever you can see, whether it's a lot of information or a little, your eyes see a lot of texture. There's a lot of information there that is recorded and rendered in a way when it is a platinum and palladium print that feels like how our eyes see, right? There's just nuance that I didn't find in other machine-made photographic processes. And so that was one of the catalysts to really pushing my work with this process. And then the flip side of that is that historically people didn't make platinum prints that were nearly pure black, right? That were just absolutely, compressing all of this information into these very, very dark, subtle tones. And that was very interesting to me because, again, it mirrored an experience that I have being in remote places where your eyes make out, subtle gradations and subtle distinctions between objects in front of you. So rather than following the historic path that photographers had followed of wanting to capitalize on all this broad range of tones in the print, I really became interested in the extremes, right? In the extreme dark tones. And so that became part of my process for years. And it still is today. But today I have taken this idea even a bit further by beginning to use these hand-coded sheets of paper in ways that they were never intended to be used. And so that kind of brings us to where I am today with my creative work.
That's fascinating. That's absolutely fascinating because while you were talking, I was kind of trying to see with my inner eye what you were describing. The darkness and those subtle pieces of information that the eye would catch in a dark room or anywhere in a dark place. And one of the things, one of the reasons I so admire professional photographers, artist photographers, is that this ability to see not only with your own eye, but capture it in the way, because iPhone cannot do that, right? iPhone is just focusing on whatever is in front of you. But that selective process that is happening in your mind that makes your eye focus on some little details and then transport those little details on the image exactly in the way that you intend to see and you intend your audience to see. That has been always fascinating to me. And thinking about doing that exact process in darkness, that's beyond my wildest dreams. Seriously. But you mentioned something that also caught my attention, and I read a little bit about that on your website, that this kind of prints that you're making, they can be only as big as your film is, right? So you need to have a film and the camera exactly the size of the print that you want to make, right? So
Right.
Two questions. How big is the biggest of
Right.
your prints? And what kind of equipment you're using? And are you holding the whole a wagon of equipment with you to the desert when you need to work?
Yeah. So the cameras that I use range in size from 4 by 5 inches to 16 by 20 inches. So that's like 10 by 12 centimeters to 40 by 50 centimeters, right? They're extremely large. And when I speak about the size of the camera, really what that means is it's the size of the film, right? That's recording the image. And the cameras are obviously very physically large also. And historically, to make a platinum print, like you said, you needed a negative that was the same size as the finished print. So if you want to make a small print that could fit, on your desktop, your literal desktop, then maybe you would use a 4 by 5 inch camera and you'd make a small print, 10 by 12 centimeters, and it fits right there quite nicely. Making a larger print that's say 16 by 20 inches, of course, becomes an object that's probably going to end up on a wall or someplace that has the space to display something like that. And yeah, it takes a lot of physical space in my truck to bring out this army of cameras with me. I usually travel with 4 or 5 cameras at one time, and I tend to operate 4 or 5 cameras at one time. Also, most of the work that I'm doing now when I'm operating multiple cameras is not just making night photographs. Right? We kind of left off there, and as a departure point to what I'm doing today. But the work that I'm doing today generally requires long exposures in the middle of the day. So by long, I mean 30 minutes to 90 minutes. And so it's conceivable to have 4 or 5 cameras going at one time. I don't want to say it's rational because it's not, and I don't want to say it's easy because it's not. But yeah, so I tend to work with a small army of cameras, and it takes a decent sized truck to bring all that stuff out because every camera needs a large tripod, and all the things that go with it, lenses and film holders, and everything else.
Hey, In the Arts Scene listeners, do you remember Mark O'Donnell from Pixel 2 Editions? He's been on the show in Season 3, Episode 7, and told us everything we need to know about giclée printing. And take my word for it, Mark and his team are the best in Southern California and beyond. I've been a client of Pixel 2 Editions since 2019, and I've been shouting about them from the rooftops ever since. Luckily, I don't have to do it anymore because I have a podcast. Despite being San Diego local, Mark and his team are working with some of the best photographers and artists from all states, including Clark Little and Kadir Nelson. And frankly, if you are a photographer or a digital artist, you don't need to be local to work with Pixel 2 Editions. Just use a file upload on their website for your heavy images and write down the specs. They can print small proofs for you on any substrate you want and ship them to you for free. And for my listeners, they offer a free 8x10 full image proof on metal. Just tell them that you heard about them on the podcast and they will take care of you. Let me tell you, their metal prints are amazing. Whenever I order mine, they fly off the shelves in no time. So I highly recommend you try it out. And oh, did I mention that they are a full service company? It means that they do everything from color correcting and printing to framing and shipping directly to you or your clients. So don't wait, go to pixel2editions.com, 2 is a number, and editions is plural, or call 858-549-7299. Again, pixel2editions.com, 2 is a number, and editions is plural, or call 858-549-7299. Say hi for me. Do you have a small army of helpers or you do everything by yourself?
I'm usually with my wife or with friends. Sometimes I am by myself. It sort of depends on what's happening, how much time I have, whatever, number of factors. But I'm pretty hesitant to ask people for help. And that's probably a bigger metaphor or problem that I have in life. So I just tend to take it on and get things done. But yeah, having people carry cameras and stuff just seems, I don't know, unnecessarily cruel, right? You go camping and you're with people in this beautiful space, it's far away. And then you say, hey, can you help me carry this 40-pound camera, over here or something? So I try not to, but people do help sometimes.
Okay. So you mentioned, that now you are doing a different work with a very, very long exposure.
Right.
How did you come to that, and what kind of feeling you were trying to capture with that process?
Yeah, the work that I'm doing today really it gets complicated quickly. And so I published a book last year with Radius Books. It's a book of this work, and the nice thing about having a book is that you have essays by smart people to contextualize it, and so there's a a creative essay written about the work by a curator from the East Coast named Joshua Chuang. And then there's an interview with myself and a curator named Virginia Heckert, who is a photography curator at the Getty in Los Angeles. And these two pieces of writing, as well as a short piece of writing by me in the book, offer a kind of window into what I'm doing. The what I call the creative essay by Josh Chuang is really, kind of positioning the work that I do in the larger context of contemporary art. The interview is really kind of nuts and bolts and helps maybe try and explain what's going on. And then my own piece of writing is just, it's a short statement really by me. But, the work it is intended to complicate photography. And what I mean by that is that I'm using two different processes to make singular finished works of art. And so those processes are the night photographs that I just explained and that are available on your iPhone or anything else, but I'm shooting those with film, with traditional film. And that film is then printed as a night photograph in my darkroom, in my studio at a later point in time. And so those photographs are easy to envision. It's a picture of the landscape. It's dark. It was taken at night, etc. Though each of those works are then also paired with a paper negative. And a paper negative is the same thing as a film negative, but it's not on a plastic sheet of film. It's on a piece of paper. And paper negatives are really how photography started in the 1830s and 1840s. There was no such thing as film, and there was such thing as paper, and people used paper negatives to then create positive print. And so I am coating sheets of platinum and palladium paper. So this is something that is intended to be used with a sheet of film in a dark room, right? I'm coating that, putting it into a film holder, which is the same kind of object that would hold a sheet of film, and then exposing that piece of paper in the desert. And so what that's creating is a negative, right? It's a negative image. Black becomes white, dark becomes light, etc. And so I have this paper negative that is an original object. It's a unique object. It's not reproducible like most photographs. And that paper negative is then grouped with a night photograph. And so visually, what most of my work ends up with are dark black photographs and light white photographs that are paired together, and they create contiguous landscapes. And these landscapes are generally fictions because they aren't necessarily a strict panorama of a space in the desert. They could be the same plant, they could be the same mountain, but taken from different positions. But they're designed to fit together, and they're designed to create works of fiction. It gets complicated, even more complicated from there.
More complicated.
Because, I have also been printing film negatives as extremely light white, I'm calling them white because the paper they're on is white, but extremely light positive prints. So you might have a paper negative that's very kind of white on white, and then this positive print that almost looks like a negative by intention. It looks like a negative, but of course all the tones are positive, right? They are as we would envision them, but it's not printed in the typical way. And so, it quickly makes people ask questions, and even museum curators and people who are highly educated in photography have a lot of questions for me. They say, I have to be honest, I don't understand what's going on. I know this is a photograph made from a piece of film, but then you have this paper negative, but then you might have the same image captured on the paper negative, printed as a positive. And this is, again, very much by design, that I want to create works of fiction. And I want to create works that are playful and that are visually engaging for our eyes to behold. And that is something that I encourage people who are not photographers or don't know about photography. I encourage them to think about, which is that this work can be met at face value. It can simply be a delight for your eyes. It can be a rendering of physical space. It exists at other levels, though. All this technical stuff I'm talking about with paper negatives is very interesting to a very small group of people who have studied the history of photography or who know these photographic processes. And so that's a kind of curiosity that, it takes a little while to really understand, well, what has Scott done here? Like, why does this look like this? I need to unpack this and understand it. And that again is part of my joy in making the work, is to make works that delight. Um, I'm not in any way trying to confuse people or trick people or anything like that. But, my own father, who is a retired pilot, very linear right brain or left brain thinker, he'll joke to me and say, I don't think I'm smart enough to understand these pictures. And I just tell him, I say, no, Dad, you're totally smart enough. You just need to look at it and enjoy what you're looking at. And that's, you can meet it right there. And you've done your job.
So while you were talking, I had this question in my head, which you partially kind of answered, but I'm still going to ask you that question. So, what is your intention? You said that you want to delight people, but at the same time, you enjoy when people are asking questions, and because it's like for some photography connoisseurs, they understand the process, but they don't understand why you're doing this and in the way you're doing this. But at the same time, you also don't want to confuse people and complicate everything. So
Right.
that in itself sounds like a very elaborate and complicated intention that you are putting onto your work. So what is actually
Sure.
behind it? Like, what do you want people to take away? Like, and let's say different people, like people like
Yeah.
me who don't understand anything but maybe curious about photography, to people who understand photography on a professional level. So what's the takeaway from your work, from all
Sure.
that range of different technical and visual experiments?
So the first intention that I have is to build on the history of photography, right? I want to expand what has historically been done with photography and explore or maybe discover new avenues of possibility that I wasn't taught to do with photography, right? To just to go new places. And when I look at the history of theater or painting or dance or music, the people who I respond to the most are the ones who push the boundaries, who've said, we can do something new with this. I mean, if you think of jazz, for example, jazz musicians were formally trained musicians. They knew how to play music. And there was a point in time when they said, you know what? Let's just improvise. Let's start making music that's discordant, that has rhythm, but also is not following a linear path, that we're not reading sheet music. And so for me, as the creator of this, it's analogous to that, in that I just want to explore new ways to do things. The world at large is going to meet this work on many different levels, and that's going to be based on people's personal experiences. And so, for somebody like yourself who appreciates photography, maybe you don't consider yourself a connoisseur of photography. What I hope you would take away from it is either a resonant sense of, yes, I've walked around at night and seen a dark, deep, moody world that looks like this. And also a sense of kind of curiosity, like, how did the mountain turn white, right? Like, why did it go from, one form to another? And, for somebody who is formally trained in photography and, let's say, a photo historian, I think the most delightful response that I get from people like that is just to say, you've made me question everything that I thought I knew about photography, and I really have to think twice when I look at this work. And that to me is all of it is part of the experience that I want viewers to get out of it, because I want people to stay with the work. I want people to have things to look at. I want it to engage their imagination. I want it to bring about questions. Maybe those questions relate to their experience, or maybe they are questions like, wow, I've never seen a photograph like this. And what a delight to see a photograph that doesn't look like every other photograph I see when I'm scrolling through Instagram or looking through my own pictures from the last family vacation. So there's a lot of different points that I hope can meet people, with the work.
Well, that is all extremely fascinating, like extremely fascinating. So, where can people find the book? Let's plug it in right here.
Yeah. Um, there is a bookshop on El Cajon Boulevard called Lang Books, Lang Books. It is at 30th and El Cajon, or right near 30th and El Cajon in San Diego. They have copies that you can walk in, pick up, and take home.
But
Uh,
someone who's listening is not from San Diego. Is there a way to order a book online?
yeah, the publisher, Radius Books,
Okay.
they sell copies. That's the
Okay.
easiest place.
Well, we'll make sure to put the link in the show notes.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, because now I like listening to you. Now I want to get that book and read through the interview that is describing all the nuts and bolts of the process and why you're creating your work, because it's really fascinating.
The book, one of the reasons that I wanted to create a book is because each of these photographs, again, most of which exist as multiple panels, right? They're diptychs, triptychs, etc. They're one of a kind works. They can't be reproduced. So if you, Galina, purchase one and take it home and hang it on your wall, and you and your family get to delight in it every day, that's great for you. And it's a bummer for the rest of the world because it's behind a locked door and they can't see it. So a book is really a way to solve that, of course. And I wanted, because all of these works are made from these specific sized cameras, I wanted the book to contain reproductions that were exactly the size of the original works. Which is true for the smaller works, 8x10s and 4x5s, because those dimensions fit conveniently into a book. When you're talking about 16 by 20 inches or 40 by 50 centimeters, that does not fit into a book. So for those works, they were shrunk, they're reduced in size, and generally speaking, those reproductions in the book are full bleeds on each page. To give a suggestion that this is the larger object. But because these objects, these original photographs, are one of a kind and are very specific to each camera size, it was important to me to carry that through in the book, so that the viewer of the book has the same kind of experience as the viewer who has the work on their wall behind the locked door somewhere.
So I have a question here, because I'm a little bit familiar with the reproduction process. I work part-time at the Fine Art Print Shop in San Diego. So and like talking to you, I understand that this is a one of a kind print. Each print is its own unique original work of art, right?
Right.
So people who are enjoying your book are probably still missing the feeling that original would give them, because it's not the platinum coated paper.
Sure.
And it's just the it may be highly what's the word I'm looking for? It's a high quality
Reproduction.
product,
Yeah.
but it's still not the same, right?
Right.
So do you feel like the book is still giving people an adequate experience?
I do. Yeah.
Okay.
And part of the reason why I'm confident in that is because the book is published by Radius.
Okay.
And Radius is a publisher that spares no expense, and they work with one printer in Italy, and they print all their books there. They literally take over the print shop for weeks at a time, several times a year, and they produce all of the current run of books there. But Radius is also as fanatical about their print quality as I am about mine. And so, truly the objects are different, right? Because one is a book and the other is a print that was soaking wet at one time, made in a darkroom. So, you're never going to have that, the true experience of the original, but it's as faithful as you can get to the original. Again, the scale, the tone, we chose a paper stock that mirrored the sort of texture and quality of the original prints. And what was really nice about it is, the ink that's laid down in printing a book plate. Uh, Really, this was one of the challenges that we faced in producing the book. Is how are we going to reproduce these accurately? And the way the ink lays on the paper, it creates such a remarkable reproduction that is so close to the original. That was serendipity. That wasn't we I don't know if we got lucky or what, but the book really, it mirrors the works quite nicely.
So the book, in a way, is the work of art in itself, and it's a very collectible item.
Yeah, and the book has a number of different gatefolds, where the pages open up and fold out. And in the end of the book, there's one piece. It's a 12 panel piece. And so that's literally an accordion stack in the book that folds out. And it's about, I don't know, a meter and a half, like 4 feet wide. It's quite large.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing. All right, just to make sure. So this episode is not sponsored by Radius. Although we will leave a link to their website and specifically to the book in the show notes. So yeah, I know that you have a very limited time, and it's been a very pleasant conversation. I feel like I learned a lot, even though um, I still find myself understanding very little about the photography process, but you explain it in a way that my creative mind understands. That maybe I don't know all the technical details, but I kind of understand where you're coming from and why you're doing the things the way you're doing them. It is extremely fascinating. I'm very very curious. Uh, if I were a little bit more knowledgeable about photography, I feel like I would probably just jump to my camera right now because I just I can see how this conversation would inspire every photographer who's listening to it. So yeah, any last word of encouragement to the listeners?
Um, I have long pursued my dreams, and I have done so at great financial expense to myself. I don't, I if I stop working tomorrow, I don't know where my next meal is coming from, and I've found peace with that, and I've found peace with pursuing a life of creativity that inspires other people and encourages the advancement of visual culture in our world, because these things matter. It's really easy to look past visual art as something that does not have influence in our lives, and it has tremendous influence in our lives. And having some sense of freedom or a feeling of freedom to pursue the work that I do it has introduced me to some amazing people who are my community of photographers. And it has really given me an enormous sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in my life that, others, I'm thinking of family members who are retired, look at me and they say, you're doing it right. I pursued a career, or I pursued money, or, whatever was the motivating thing to go to work every day. We started the conversation talking about medium photo, and medium is an extension of all of this as well. And that has become my desk job. I mean, photography is a desk job too, because all art, all jobs are desk jobs, really, when you get down to it. But the ability to run a nonprofit and to work in service of the community by providing the community outlets for creative education, creative awareness, and understanding. These two are they're like, a French braid in your hair or something. I mean, they are just completely intertwined. I don't know which one came first. I mean, I do, of course, it was just me making photographs, but one led to the other, and then one feeds the other. And this is not something I could have ever planned, when I was in college or coming out of college or talking to a mentor. Nobody could have said, okay, Scott, this is what you need to do. So that's my words of encouragement. Is, pursuing your creative path, not knowing where it's going to take you, and that not knowing is a beautiful thing.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, because I know some of our listeners are actually struggling with that because of different messages across the board that how to continue making art as art, but at the same time run it as a business, so you don't have to go starve. That's by far probably the biggest question that I have heard from many artists who are my listeners. So thank you so much for that. This is a good reminder to everyone, myself included, that you just pursue your dream, because it's leading you somewhere. You have no idea where, but it's the right path, and you just need to stick to it.
Yeah,
All right. Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
likewise.
And we will make sure again to leave all the links to everything we were talking about today in the show notes, so you can find Scott, you can find Medium Photo, you can find his book, you can submit your application to the next festival, and yeah, well, it's great to have you in the art scene.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. It's really been a pleasure.
It has been another episode of In the Art Scene podcast. If you liked today's conversation, please give us a good review on Apple and go listen to other great stories. Check out our website intheartscene.com or follow us on Instagram at intheartscene for more content. If you are a creative and you want to share your story, shoot us a message from the website or DM us on Instagram. Look forward to seeing you next time in the Art Scene.